All right, hey everyone. Today our guest is Keith. Keith is interesting because he's our buddy who has moved to Texas a few years ago. So we want to dive into that, then move from California to Texas. And also, Keith used to work in the furniture industry, which is also relevant for us, for many of us who are about to, get our first homes, and we don't have furniture and we don't know where to start. We don't want to get ripped off. So, Keith, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start with the second question first. Let's talk about furniture. Who did you used to work for, and just how competitive is this like furniture industry?
Great. So I worked for Room and Board for about 6 years, and I got to see the Chicago market a little bit, and then I moved out to Los Angeles with the company. And I also spent a little bit of time with CB2 and Crate and Barrel before that, which are part of the Crate and Barrel family, another big national retailer. And it's an interesting industry because furniture sales oftentimes are very much tied into real estate sales. So when real estate sales go up, furniture sales go up, accordingly. Sometimes there's also other weird factors like natural disasters. Like sometimes a natural disaster happens and people get all their homes and goods wiped out, and then people have to go out and rebuy that stuff, and it can be really daunting. And I think if you're starting from scratch and you haven't inherited furniture from your family or friends or anything like that, especially if you buy this big beautiful 3-bedroom house, it has a dining room, living room, all these things, you suddenly realize I have nothing to fill this, and you want to invite people over to see your beautiful new empty space. And so one of the things that Crate and Barrel and Room and Board and other larger national retailers like your Restoration Hardwares and places like that, they offer in-house design services that are complimentary. So you can go in there and say, hey, here are the plans to my home, and people will actually sit there and for free basically give you design consultation. I think having been on that side of it, when we have clients that come in that have photos of their space, blueprints or of their home and the different sizing of the spaces, and even just kind of a general direction of where they want to take the space, you'll end up getting fantastic service. And it's going to be hit or miss in terms of who you work with. And so I always recommend, before you dive in with somebody, make sure that what you're hoping for connects with what that person can provide. Sometimes you walk into a really modern store and you assume that all the employees there love modern design, but some of them, for them, it's just a job and they may like more traditional stuff or whatever it may be. So, you want to make sure that you really click with whoever is going to be providing you with that service. And the more that you put into it, the more you're going to get back. Because we oftentimes have people that come in that, they don't give us anything to work with. And they're like, furnish my home. I don't know what my budget is. I don't have any inspiration photos. I can't tell you what size my space is. And it's like, it's like trying to show up to a car dealership and not, knowing if you want an SUV or a sedan or anything like that.
That's kind of me.
Hard to help
That's
a person
kind of
out like
me.
that.
So let's talk about that. I mean, I think what are the first couple of steps? I think just when we're talking about real estate, I think maybe the first step is like budget. Would you agree?
Yep.
Okay, so give us a sense of let's just say a 2-bedroom house or condo. Obviously, the house is a little bit bigger. What ballpark are we talking about that people should be even thinking of? Because I'm on a couple of these websites right now. I see like one chair and it's $1,000.
Right. So it's a great question. I think you see people that are able to fully furnish a house and layer a house for like $5,000. And those people, they're putting the time in, they're going out to, yard sales and to estate sales and finding deals on Craigslist and making their own art and doing stuff like that. I mean, you can, if you really invest in putting the time into finding deals, then there are things, you can go to outlets, you can do resale, consignment shops, all sorts of stuff like that. If you expect to walk into a Room and Board or Crate and Barrel or a national retailer and have them fully furnish your house, it's going to cost you anywhere between $20,000 to $40,000. like easy. And that's if you want, you know, everything new, you want decor. There's a concept called layering. So it's, you know, you can walk into a house and they have, you know, a sofa and a coffee table, but if you want that like sofa with the pillow on it and like a blanket and accessories on your coffee table and cool art behind you, like that stuff adds up. You know, that's like the rust proofing, you know, the undercoating of the, you know, that's where furniture like those places, they love selling accessories and stuff like that because it completes the room and gives people the feel that they're looking for, but it just adds up and you don't even realize it all the time. So if you're wanting to go full on, like I'm just gonna walk into a store and say, hey, give me my whole house, like you're gonna be putting a couple, you know, tens of thousands of dollars down for sure.
Okay, well, I guess you mentioned one good thing, which is something I didn't know about, which is they offer these free design sessions. So at the minimum, once again, I feel like our audience are going to be busy, you know, tech employees, and they're probably just like lazy as shit like me. So I could definitely get my blueprints, show up to a couple of these stores,
Yep.
give them like a rough budget, or just say like, "Hey, I'm looking for X, Y, and Z. What do you guys think?" And then go from there. Do you have any thoughts on why furniture is so expensive? Like, where is it
Yep.
manufactured? And then, like, is it is that why it's expensive or not?
So, you know, I think just to touch back on your last question a little bit, you know, if somebody doesn't have time, a lot of stores, like it's, I think people are surprised, but when I worked at Room and Board, sometimes I would be working directly with an interior designer and not the client itself. So if you have the funds and you want to be completely separated from the process, I mean, you can go find an interior designer that's going to basically, you have to pay, you know, a pretty sizable amount, but I mean, they can kind of take that whole piece out of it. Uh, you're gonna obviously that's gonna increase your overall cost, but you know, for furniture itself, there's so much. Even like a sofa, there's so many different manufacturers that go into making a sofa. Like you have a foam company, you have a fabric company, you have a wood company, you have like the hardware company, you have the people that are actually, you know, building the insides of the sofa, that are actually upholstering all this stuff, you know, and like microfiber, which is like micro suede, which is a really popular fabric. Like all of that stuff is manufactured in China. And so you have to, you know, that stuff gets manufactured there and gets shipped across the country. And that's why a lot of people are seeing delays. Like if you try to go buy a custom sofa right now, it's like, oh, we'll get it to you in 2023 or 2024 because there's parts that are coming from around the world. And I think to me, that's one of the things I actually look at, and you know, I try to talk to a retailer about is where is this stuff being sourced and who's making it, because you know, like a wood piece, it could be a forest, a protected forest here in the United States, and they're cutting down the wood here, but then they're shipping it to Indonesia, and it's getting like processed and cut, and then shipped back to America for final assembly. And so there's like, you'll see made in America, you'll see assembled in America, you'll see like parts from America. And so I think it kind of depends on how, you know, what you value as a consumer and, you know, what's important to you. Because you can get pieces that are, you know, a sofa that's a couple $100 that was probably made of, you know, low cost materials, you know, overseas and, you know, assembled that way. Or you can get a sofa that's made in America that's, you know, this is the folks like generational families that have been assembling furniture in North Carolina, that they've passed this craft down from generation to generation. Or you can get like a custom one from Italy, which costs $10,000 to $20,000 that has the internal construction. I always say, like, when you look at a sofa, all we ever really see is the outside of it, but it's all that goes into the inside of the sofa that people don't really understand. There's so many different types of, you know, cushion cores and spring suspension systems, and the frames themselves, like what wood they're made out of, and if they're corner block. There's, you know, things that most normal people never should never even have to think about or worry about. But when you really understand all that goes into a sofa, you know, you start to appreciate why they cost so much, because it's really, you know, a lot of craftsmanship and manufacturing that goes into that. And you know, sometimes people even wonder why a chair is only sometimes only like $100 or $200 less than the sofa that's from the same collection. And it's because of the labor costs. Like the actual material cost between a chair and a sofa is very minimal, but everything else that goes into it is basically the same. So you really do get what you pay for, especially when it comes to sofas and stuff like that. If you're getting a sofa that's under $1,000, chances are it's not going to hold up very well. And one of the ways that you can kind of test this, there's like a technique where you can actually kind of lift up one corner of a sofa, and if the sort of the short side, if the other side lifts up with it, that means you have a nice sturdy construction. But if you lift up one corner and all of 3 other corners stay on the ground, that means you basically have this, like flimsy construction that over time, people sitting on it, you moving it around, all of that stuff, it's gonna creak, it's gonna crack, and potentially break and all that stuff. So you really do. I mean, furniture, like upholstery in particular, you really do get what you pay for. If it seems like it's too cheap, it probably is. And if it's super, super expensive, then you probably you're probably going to get something good, but you have to be willing to pay that price.
My question to you is, are these retail stores, are their inventory even like local? I assume parts of it is. Let's say I want to buy a chair in California, I might as well just like buy here rather than anywhere else. Is that correct?
Well, I mean, the national retailers have pretty widespreading distribution systems. Like Room and Board, for instance, every single market that they had a physical store in, they would have a distribution center somewhere close by. And then there are sort of like the main centralized distribution center, like warehouses. So they would keep, most national retailers, like if you go in to buy a sofa, it'll come in stock in, maybe 2 or 3 different sizes and 2 or 3 different fabric options. And then they obviously keep like a massive inventory in 1 or 2 centralized places. And then the distribution centers, depending on the popularity of the pieces, I mean, like Room and Board, for instance, we tracked everything on, I think it was on SAS, or it was a pretty, we had live tracking of all the inventory and where it was, and so they were able to look at purchasing patterns and shipping patterns and try to keep things locally. So certain things, you could get really quick turnaround, or even if it wasn't local, I mean, they had shipping networks where you could get things, quite quickly, and not necessarily like Amazon speed all the time, but within 1 or 2 weeks or a month or so. And the distribution centers, they also, good retailers will actually make sure that they do inspections. So like with at Room and Board, every single piece before it was delivered to home, even if it was shipped fully wrapped, they would actually unwrap everything, inspect it. If kind of one of the secrets of the furniture industry, I guess, is that certain pieces, if there's actually minor damage or anything on it, they'll actually repair it in the distribution center. So even your pieces that are brand new, a table or a cabinet might get some bumps and bruises along the way, and so they have really skilled furniture repair people that are making sure that your furniture is in as good as condition as they can have it, and then they rewrap and package everything and then have it delivered into your home. So definitely that's one of the big challenges of the furniture industry, compared to having a digital product where you don't have to worry about physical inventory and stuff like that. In furniture, you have to have these massive warehouses and massive shipping trucks, because everything is takes 2 or 3 people to deliver, and there's a big expense to holding inventory like that. And that certainly is part of the cost of it also, is companies are having to buy all this stuff. And I think one of the confusions is, like, when you go to a Crate and Barrel or Room and Board and you're buying a sofa there, you are buying a Crate and Barrel sofa, or you are buying a Room and Board sofa, but really you're probably getting it from one of about 4 or 5 different US manufacturers. So there's like American Leather in Texas, there's McCreary out in North Carolina, there's Shenandoah, which is in Virginia. There's different manufacturers that are doing this for the different, so you could get a sofa from Crate and Barrel that's made from the same manufacturer as one from Room and Board or somewhere else. And so, trying to manage inventories across these different companies and the, changes in availability and all that stuff. I mean, that all certainly gets, factored into the price of all the stuff and the lead time to actually
Okay.
be able to get it.
Let me ask Frank a question because I have a lot more follow-ups for you. So for Frank, going back to his layering concept earlier, I do notice that, when I was looking at new homes on like Redfin or Zillow, the ones that were furnished and had like really nice stylish photos, it really caught my attention. So the two-part question for you is, have you ever, let's say you're selling a house, do you feel like having the house being furnished actually increases the purchase price? And the second question is, when you're flipping homes, I'm assuming it's just bare, there's nothing inside, and you would never go through the effort of like furnishing it just to take a photo, correct?
Yeah, correct. So to answer your first question, I don't know if staging the house necessarily increases the value. In this market, I would say yeah, just because there's so little inventory. You make the house look real nice, and then there's several buyers, they're competing against each other. They want the house, value goes up. Staging a house definitely helps. And my group, what we've been doing for the last year or so, instead of just doing the house remodel and then bringing in the stager at the end, we now have a person that does staging and interior design. So when we get the property, before we start opening up any walls, adding a bathroom, changing the floor plan around, we bring our stager in so that she can look at the property and get a concept. And then now she's strategically designing and placing furniture to make a nice complete product. And we've had a lot of success with that. And I think out of maybe like say 20 houses in the last year and a half, only one person has actually bought the staging. Most people don't buy it. But I had one recently where the buyer loved the staging. She's like, I don't know what it is, but I felt that your designer designed this house for me. And she bought like everything but like one couch. And I think she spent about $5,500 on the staging. Decorations, no couch, couple chairs, table, things like that. So it definitely is an improvement, helps.
No, that's awesome. I had no idea you could buy staging. I'm assuming staging is like not part of the loan process, Jason. This is just something extra on top you could buy. Like that's not considered part of the house or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly. And in fact, like, so in some markets, like I know it's very popular in Palm Springs because those homes are more secondary homes. It happens a lot where people go and I want everything, especially if it's a cool mid-century modern home. And it's not necessarily like, call it staging, like the family that lived there, the owner that lived there, everything just vibe. The new person comes in and says, I don't want to have to try to figure out furniture and bring it out here. This is sick. So I want to buy the house all complete.
So Chase, let's say you wanted to buy all the furnishings, and it could run 20 to 40 grand or maybe even higher. Can you get a loan for that, or no? You can only get a loan on the property itself.
Yeah, so you are definitely not going to get financing from your lender for furniture and that stuff. I mean, in all honesty, we have to like explicitly split that stuff off. So like, say you're buying a place and it comes with, even like a TV, right? Like an outdoor TV. I had one recently. There's an outdoor TV, and it was written into the contract that was going to be part of the purchase. We had to actually have the agent go back and pull that out and write a separate addendum to state that there's no monetary value given to the TV, right? I guess in an underwriter's view, and it's obviously a little skewed, but hypothetically, the house could be worth nothing, and the entire value of the property could be the TV. And all of a sudden, somebody takes that TV, walks away, and now your house value has dropped. So that's the actual nuts and bolts of why they look at it that way. But yeah, furniture and that stuff can't be financed with like a traditional mortgage loan. Obviously, you can get loans from other companies and stuff to take care of that, though.
So Keith, back to you with a couple of questions. We're entering the holiday season, lots of supply chain issues, as you mentioned, and Thanksgiving, Black Friday, plus holiday shopping is just going to put freaking stress and cramp into the system. So given that, when do you think is the best time to buy furniture? Time could mean best pricing plus the time it takes for you to actually receive the furniture.
So that's a great question. I mean, I think with the supply chain issues right now, I would say as soon as you find something that you love, buy it and don't wait, because I don't know if it's going to get any better, in the future. And I certainly have had some friends and even a former colleague of mine who recently purchased a new home. and she was dealing with that same thing of, hey, do I wait 6 months for this piece that I really love, or get this other one that's in stock that's going to be okay? And I think people have to weigh that out. Obviously, are you going for a place that you're going to be happy with and you just go for it, or do you want to wait until you find every single piece that you love? And that's a personal thing. And I will say, in terms of timing, a lot of furniture companies actually do things very seasonally. So they'll have like summer collections and fall collections and winter collections and things like that. And like Room and Board does a full annual announcement basically in January of like, hey, this is our big collection for the next year. And whenever there's an announcement of a new collection, that's usually whenever the old collections go on sale or clearance or something like that. So I tell friends all the time, like, if you want to buy outdoor furniture, don't buy it at the beginning of the season, because that's when everything's going to be full price. Like, wait until the end of the season, whenever they're moving into to winter or something, or fall, and then you have the ability to buy stuff on clearance. And maybe you miss out, and again, it's part of the game of saving money. It's like, maybe that piece that you absolutely loved, they run out of inventory and they don't have any more on order, and you're out of luck. You're never going to get that. Or maybe you find it at the end of the season and it's 30, 40, 50% off. So, I think that's where it's important for people to establish what their budget, what they feel comfortable spending on different parts of their house, and prioritizing that stuff. And when you find pieces at the right price that you love, go for it. Don't wait, buy it. And, but if it's something that, if you can wait on it or it's not important, then it's gonna help your budget out.
Let's talk about this interior designer, because both you and Frank mentioned it. How does, like, it just seems like a crazy, like, not just like a foreign concept to me. Where do you find interior designers, and how much do they cost? Once again, I bet you this is one of those things that there's like a wide range of costs. I'll start with Keith and then we'll turn over to Frank.
Well, I mean, I think I've certainly dealt with, there are stagers and there are interior designers, and sometimes interior designers do some staging things, but some people actually, that's like their sole business is staging. They have their own inventory and their own warehouse, and they'll go out and and put it into different spaces and kind of move it around as a service. But for interior designers, I mean, I think word of mouth is usually really huge in that community. Talking to other people, there are actual license, I think it's AIAA interior designers. I might have that acronym wrong, but I mean, you can actually go up and look for, licensed interior designers in your area that you can kind of contract out and different things like that. And then I'm like, Instagram is a great place to find that stuff, because every interior designer wants to show off their work. And so, find inspiration photos and things on there that you like, and reach out. And they're like anybody else. They always need another project, because as there are certain clients that are constantly buying homes and stuff like that, but usually they're having to move from client to client. So they're reaching out to them is fantastic. I mean, I'm sure most of them appreciate that.
So Frank, how about you? What budgets and how do you find interior designers that you like? Let's say separate from staging.
Yeah, so just like what Keith said, a lot of it is social media. Sexy pictures. People are like, oh, I want that. And either right in front of that or right behind that is word of mouth. I pay an interior designer, they come and they dial my house in. I have a party, people come over. Wow, I like this. Who do you use? So I've known interior designers that do 1 or 2 jobs and it gets promoted right, and then they blow up and their phones don't stop ringing. People are standing in line like, I want that look. As far as costs go, probably not the best person to ask for that, because the interior designer, she does staging, interior design that I work with. She does all of my projects. So it's a flat fee depending on the size of the house. Plus she's going to get the staging. So we get a pretty smoking deal. I have talked to other interior designers that I tried to work with, but they were just too expensive. And it comes down to time too. Like, if they're working on you know, these 10, 15, 20, I mean, gosh, sky's the ceiling, designing these beautiful homes in Newport Beach and Corona del Mar. I mean, you know, and this flipper's trying to get you to design his place for like a flat 2,000 bucks. It's just not worth your time. It didn't work out. So the lady that we use, she does a smoking job. She gets a ton of volume from us, and she gets the stage, versus other designers. They're gonna cost you for sure. They're gonna cost you tens of thousands of dollars.
That makes sense. All right, Keith, back to you about just like the concept of custom made furniture. You know, it's the example you just gave earlier, like a custom made like leather, Italian leather sofa. You always hear about that. Or like, you know, custom made Italian anything, shoes, suits, whatever. Let me give you a smaller use case, personal use case, which is actually one of my dreams to have is not that, but what I really want is like a custom bookshelf, right? Like, how do I get a custom bookshelf?
I think one of the cool places to be able to get custom stuff like that is actually going to like vintage shops and retail shops, because a lot of times their pieces are coming in and they need a lot of work done, or if they're running low on vintage inventory, they'll actually source out like custom designs and things to fill up, you know, space in their showrooms. And so a lot of times you can go to, like, especially in Los Angeles, there was a couple of really cool vintage mid-century shops that I used to go to, and they had guys that were building them, you know, custom sofas, custom case pieces, like wood pieces, and all of that stuff. So oftentimes you can go through them or get their information directly and be able to have basically anything that you want made. And then a lot of you know, big retailers now, some of them do have custom programs, but they're going to be, you know, really expensive. Like if you go into a furniture place and you start using that word custom, you're going to increase your cost by 30 or 40%, like off the bat. And so, but like I had a friend in Los Angeles that found, you know, I think through a friend or through one of these vintage shops I was talking about, you know, found somebody that made really cool custom sofas where she was able to pick, you know, the length of it, the depth of it, the feel of it, the fabric, and all of that stuff, and have it made for about the same price. I think it was in like the $1,500 to $2,000 range, which is pretty standard nowadays for sofa when you go into one of the big national retailers. But again, it's like, you know, whenever she was going through that process, there was all sorts of questions that I was asking. I was like, you know, what are the foam cores made out of? What kind of suspension system? Like all these things, because you want to make sure you're still getting a good product. But those independent manufacturers, you know, the custom guys, they don't have the same overhead and, you know, distribution requirements and, you know, probably insurance and overhead of showrooms and all of that stuff. So you're able to oftentimes get, you know, a really good product for the same, if not cheaper, as, you know, a stock item from a retailer. But yeah, they're certainly out there.
So it sounds like go directly to the manufacturer. So why don't
not
more people just do
necessarily
that?
like,
oh, okay.
Like I don't, because, you know, it would be like if you tried to go to, you know, whoever, you know, who makes iPhones now and be like, hey, I want you to hook me up with that. Like they have their exclusive contracts and stuff like that, and they're not going to want to undercut. So all of these folks, I mean, they're independent craftsmen, basically. They're people that do this independently. You know, they're usually not tied to some big manufacturer, because I mean, these are large scale manufacturing. I mean, I don't think people always think about like the scale of furniture manufacturing and, you know, all that goes into that. Even like if you ever YouTube a video of how foam is created, I mean, it's like these giant machines that are creating these like massive sheets of foam and all of that stuff. So it's like you can't roll up to, you know, to one of them and say, hey, make me one of these, because they're just not going to have the, they're not, it's not going to be in their best interest to do this, because they're building everything at scale. But I mean, that's sort of the value. So like if you get a stock item, you're getting the value of things being built at scale. And if you go to, you know, a small craftsman, you get the value of them not having the overhead of, you know, of a big retailer.
Got it. So small craftsman is not like the scale you were talking about. So how do we find, or how does one find like a small craftsman? Let's say you're getting most of your stuff from a retailer. How do you find a small craftsman to design one thing for you, let's say, or make one thing they always make?
Well, and that's what I was thinking about, like going to like a vintage shop or, like a really small, like a one-off furniture store or something like that, where they're having to figure out how to fill their own inventory. And so they're going to have like local manufacturers and local producers and stuff. Like Los Angeles has a thriving custom furniture industry of guys that are super talented that are making pieces for designers or making them, for these, vintage shops and things like that. So certainly, and sometimes you'll, again, the vintage shop, they might be protective of their own, they have this person that, they'll probably want you to go through them to be able to buy this thing, but you also might be able to track them down through social media and, find the guy on Instagram and direct message him and certain things like that. But certainly, yeah, they're out there and they're building really fantastic stuff. It's just, it's a little bit harder to find because these guys, they're doing it because this is their craft. Like most of them are not self-promoters. They're not, doing all, like, this is just what they do, and they love making furniture and they love doing this stuff. So you kind of have to seek them out a little bit because they're probably not doing it to make, become super rich. They're doing it because it's just the trade that they know and that they're really good at.
All right, Frank or Jason, any other final questions for Keith?
Well, I was just going to add one other resource, and you may already have to be using the designer, but interior decorators usually have people that will custom make furniture. When they're designing something, it's like, okay, here's option A from this place, or I can get a quote from my custom furniture guy to come out and put this bed in where there isn't going to be a 3-inch gap on this side and a gap on this side. It's going to be dialed in. So, but you probably already have to be paying them in order to use their resources. But just, that's another way of coming across a custom furniture person.
Okay, so actually, what I meant was last question as it relates to furniture. So let's talk about Austin. So Keith, I'm sure you've seen a lot of movement from California, especially, or just other states going to Texas. Give us a sense of, since you've lived there for I think like 5 years now, or you let us know how long you've lived there. What has the Austin real estate market looked like over the time that you've lived there?
Austin was never designed to be a big city. It was supposed to be kind of a smaller, it was the capital of Texas, but for most of my life, it was not a huge city. It was kind of a smaller, medium-sized city. And so we didn't really have the housing infrastructure to accommodate a giant boom like what's been happening. So, I mean, the amount of new construction, the thing that Austin and Texas does have going for it is we have land. And so, whereas in like Los Angeles, it's like you always have to knock down a house to build a house in the city. There are still pockets of Los Angeles where basically was just like a field or, nothing. And so developers that are coming in and popping up all these new neighborhoods, and there are luxury condos going everywhere. And from the time that I was here in college to now, I joke that basically like every parking lot or empty lot is now like a luxury condo, building or something like that. So the landscape of the city has really changed in that sense. But the pricing has just continued to skyrocket because, right now we're still trying to build all of this stuff, but the demand is so high. I know quite a few people that have just tried to purchase a home, put an offer on a home, and before you can even do a tour of the home or anything like that, there's already 10, 12, 15 offers in. And so it's like, you can't even put your foot in the door of the house to see what's going on. And people have already boosted the price way above the market asking price. And homes that, would have been in the $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 range, even whenever I moved here, are starting to get into that $700,000 or $800,000 range. And even places like the number of homes in Austin that are selling for over $1 million it's honestly, it's hard to believe. So if you've been in Austin for a long time and live in a couple of different pockets, you're real happy about it right now, except for property taxes, because Texas does not have the same property tax protections that California has. And the property tax rate is significantly higher than California. So there are people that they're struggling with extremely high property tax bills. So, it's kind of a double-edged sword there, where if you had real estate here, you're happy about the increased value, but you're having to pay that increased property tax. And then for the people that are coming out from California, the prices probably don't feel that different. Like if you lived in Seattle or San Francisco or LA, like it doesn't seem that different to you, but it's continuing to just raise the price up. So if you were like somebody that's lived in Texas for a long time, your head is exploding at the prices. But if you move from the
Well, that's the
West
thing.
Coast,
Are
you're like,
you?
hey, not that bad.
No, 100%. And that's, because the three of us, well, all of us used to live in California, but three of us still live there. So the prices, we have a different price range here. So the local, what do you call it, Austinites? I don't know what the right lingo is.
Yeah, Austinites.
Like, are they just? It's Austin. Okay, like, are they just like pissed off because now, let's say they didn't buy a home and they were saving, and now all of a sudden prices are so high they can't afford it anymore. What do they do? Move
Yeah.
out of the city?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the suburbs are really growing up, and there's a corridor between San Antonio and Austin. That's there's I-35, which is the main road that connects San Antonio to Austin, and has little towns in it. There's like Kyle, Buda, San Marcos, all these little towns that have always just been like really quaint little quiet towns that are suddenly blowing up, and their real estate value is getting huge because all these people that used to buy $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 homes in Austin are now buying in those communities. So you're seeing, the kind of little small town suburban boom is really happening, and there's still tons of land around Austin. I mean, that space between Austin and San Antonio, I think the market value is going to continue to grow exponentially because you're connecting two major U.S. cities there. And then in the northern suburbs of Austin, North Austin is where a lot of the tech companies have moved in. So that's a lot of like younger couples and tech people sort of live on the north side of Austin. And so you have communities like Round Rock and Georgetown and Cedar Park, which is kind of a little bit northwest, where those communities like used to be able to buy a big house on a big piece of land, and you could have your kids there and go to good schools and all that stuff. And now that stuff is being bought out by like young professionals because that's where you can afford it. So certainly, I think the perspective of what a reasonably priced house is in Austin has completely shifted, even in the 5 years that I've been here.
Last question for you is, we've heard a lot about migration, but we've also talked a little bit about buyer's remorse. And Chasen talked about, hey, if you want to move to a new state, don't just go for a weekend. Like maybe try to work remotely there for a month or two. So question for you is, since you do have kind of friends and family, Texas plus California, have you heard of anyone who moved from California or any other state and they actually ended up not liking it? Like I haven't lived in Texas. Is it just like too hot in the summer? Like what are some things you've heard from people who recently moved over?
Well, so I mean, there are certainly people that love it, and there are people that they realize it's not for them. I mean, I think a lot of people do come for South by Southwest. The city's super fun. There's great energy here, and Austin is is a great town in a lot of different ways. But to your point, like the summertime, I mean, I grew up in Texas, and I try to get out as much as I possibly can in the summertime because it's brutal. And if you're not used to that, it's going to be a rude awakening for folks, especially if you lived in West LA or up in San Francisco. Months of that extreme heat and mosquitoes and different stuff like that is going to be a rude awakening. And then, politically, Austin has a reputation of being, this really progressive liberal city, but it's still in perspective to Texas. It's how it's compared to sort of the rest of the politics in Texas. And so, especially if you, again, you're LA and, San Francisco and Seattle, depending on where you fall on the spectrum, if that feels like it's, politically, a place that you align with, I think some people kind of struggle with that here. And even if you sort of venture out to Dallas and Houston and different areas, kind of what that feels like. And then the last thing is just sort of the cultural diversity of Austin. Austin is still a predominantly white city. And we do have a fairly decent Hispanic population in size, but the Asian community is much smaller compared to Houston, and the Black community here is much smaller compared to other, parts of the country and stuff like that. So, and I certainly have known people of sort of South Asian or East Asian heritage that have moved here and have had a harder time finding a community for them than what they were expecting. But if you're somebody that like, hey, you move here for Facebook and you want to just hang out with Facebook people or like Google or whatever, like you'll be fine. But I think for some people that are maybe a little bit older, that are having kids or anything like that, finding that community to kind of raise your family in can be a little bit challenging. So I think for younger people, I think most young people have a great time out here and they kind of figure it out. But if you're kind of transitioning to another different, part in your life, then certainly making sure that you're in the right part of Austin is going to have a big impact over sort of your community feel.
Thanks, Keith, for stopping by. I learned that we learned a lot about furniture today, and yeah, it's exciting. Like I had no idea. I feel like we could talk maybe even 2 more hours just about furniture. So thank you.
So thanks for having me.